Hello and welcome to Empowered Movements with me, Darlene A Anderson, entrepreneur, motivational speaker, personal and professional development consultant, and to many of you, your self-direction broker in the state of New York under the Office of People with Developmental Disabilities, also known as OPWDD. Welcome. If you're joining me for the very first time and you're here for all things self-direction, I invite you to check out the prior videos. It can help you along your journey as you are preparing to self-direct or if you are an active self-directing participant. Okay, if you are a returning viewer, I appreciate you so very much. Your comments, your likes, your shares, your subscription, thank you so very much. I ask as a collective, we continue to like, share, and subscribe accordingly. And please click that notification bell so you will be in the know of the latest happenings as they are happening. Okay, let's dive right into the topic for today, DDP2 scores. For many of you that are not familiar with that acronym, it stands for Developmental Disability Profile. This form will be conducted throughout your OPWDD services for years on a continuum, every 1, every 2 years, or as needed. It is a measurement that's utilized to assess your medical, to assess your behavior, and to assess your level of care. You will be introduced to this form at the first time of determining your eligibility under OPWDD. That means that when you're submitting your documentation and somebody calls you or invites you in personally, once upon a time, right? You're sitting there and you're going over this questionnaire and you're asking a series of questions to a self-advocate or to a designee. Again, this tool is used to assess your medical, your behavior, and your level of care. And what happens is once this form is completed, it is inputted into the database for OPWDD, which is called choices. Once it goes into choices, then your level of care as it relates to the various services you will be receiving is determined based on this questionnaire. For self-direction purposes, once it's done and it's put into choices, a broker will ask for the scores from that DDP2. Now, there are 3 scores that a broker will ask for: the adaptive score, the behavior score, and the health score. Now, these scores are generated again once a provider puts in the answers from your questionnaire into the choices database. When a broker then gets these 3 scores from that assessment, we actually use that and we put it in the self-direction template that's provided to us by the state. We cannot manipulate the scores. We only can go by what we're giving, and when we put it in, the template then kicks back because it's pre-generated. They work on these templates and they put in different categories, different things to determine what your level of care will be specific to self-direction. So, and when I say they, meaning the state, it's created. Once it's and it's an Excel sheet. Once again, I get the numbers, I put it into the Excel sheet, and it kicks back a number to me. That dollar amount is what's considered to be your personal resource allowance. Your personal resource allowance, also known as your PRA, that is the funds that are allotted to you for self-direction purposes. It will be provided to you on a continuum unless you submit for an amendment, which we'll speak about that in later videos. If you submit an amendment, then those numbers can possibly change. Again, we'll speak about that later on. But generally, those numbers, that is the amount that you're given towards your personal resource allowance. Now, as I stated prior, those numbers cannot be manipulated in any type of way, and they shouldn't be. However, what you can do is ensure when you're doing the DDP2 score that the information that you are providing is accurate. And I find that that's where most of the problems lie, is that sometimes we don't understand what we're answering and we're answering incorrectly. Also, we're not cross-referencing documentation that will help support some of the things that we're telling them when we're completing these questionnaires. So just to give a couple of examples, the first thing, I mentioned 3 things actually, that a DDP2 score is used to measure medical, behavior, and your level of care. Now, I also spoke in a prior video about ensuring that your medical form is accurate, your psychosocial is accurate, your psych evaluation is accurate, your neurological evaluation is accurate, your IEP is accurate. All of these documents should be utilized to answer questions specific to the DDP2 score. So if they're asking you to give your child's diagnosis, it shouldn't be something that you're just making up based on what you're seeing. It should be what the doctor has documented as your child's diagnosis, as your child's developmental disability. There are some, for example, if your child has autism, then you're documenting them as autism, which is separate in itself from intellectual disability. You want to ensure you're checking off everything on that DDP2 score that allows, that speaks to what is on the documentation about your child's disability as well as their diagnosis. And I'm just going to pull up this file a little bit so I can use it as a point of reference. So just going over some questions here on the form specific to what some family members tend to get wrong or don't check off everything. The disability description, again, you want to make sure that you're checking off intellectual disability or autism or epilepsy, learning disability. You're checking off all of these things. Now, sometimes it might be questioned, what's a learning disability? And they might look towards anything that's here, which is dyslexia and a couple of other things. Those are not the only learning disabilities. Anything that means you're not learning the same as everyone else in the school. If you have an IEP, you have a learning disability. This should always be checked. Always be checked. When you're doing the disability description, again, it's not necessarily what you deem as your child or yourself as a self-advocate. It's what's being documented. I will go a step further and say, I use the range of scores. And when you look at the IQ scores, and we'll get into some of those, it's not for you to decide. It's what it says the range of score is. You go with that. And then usually the range of score and what they're stating in text and words is accurate. But sometimes the range and what they're putting in words isn't accurate. So you have to then understand the categories of mild, moderate, severe. You have to understand those categories so you're documenting it accordingly. When you go to medical, you have to make sure the medical section, you're listing everything. Again, it's not what you think, it's what's documented. So you want to make sure you have everything out. If your child has asthma, if your child has other respiratory problems, if your child has cardiovascular problems, if your child has neurological problems, like you're putting down all of these things. And I think I named most of them. GI problems, you're putting all of these things. And then in most cases, if you don't see your medical condition here, look it up and see what category it can go in. I've done that for a lot of parents and it actually helps. So you definitely want to make sure that you're documenting the medical section properly. There are some other sections that kind of get parents. The other thing is that psychiatric. A lot of parents don't check psychiatric, but your child is on medication to help with behavior for whatever reason. If your child is taking any form of psychotropic medication, then yes, they have a mental diagnosis and you have to check psychiatric. And that goes into the behavior. The level of care is the area that a lot of parents generally don't document correctly, or they don't give information correctly as an interviewee. And I'll speak to that a little bit. I've stated prior in the first video, when you are doing this questionnaire, you have to speak to yourself or your loved one as they are on their worst day, not their best. Because their best day doesn't equate to requiring services, right? You have to literally speak about how they are on their worst day. And I find that when it comes to discussing acuity, a lot of parents don't do that. So if you're one of those parents, please, moving forward, please ensure that you're illustrating your child or an auntie or a sibling or something on their worst day. And I'll give you an example of that. This is the area that generally a lot of people get stuck on. The area where it says, as best you can, indicate how independently individuals typically perform each activity. And it's categories of total support, assistance, supervision, independent. Parents will automatically circle independent because they feel as if it's something that they're working on with their loved one, their children, or again, a sibling, or even self-advocates will say that they do it independently, but they might have maybe 2 full-time staff and a part-time staff. And if you have that much staff, you're definitely not doing these things independently. You're doing it with supervision or assistance. And in some cases, it's total support. So please be mindful and speak to your providers, speak to your care managers, speak to your brokers. If you have a broker and you're going over this document with them, speak to them about what category you fall in, because independent means that you can get up. Let's take making your bed. You can get up in the morning, you can get out of your bed, you can make up your bed without anybody else being present, do everything you have to do, then come out and get ready to jump into the shower. How many of you have children that are doing that independently without a verbal prompt, without a hand-over-hand support, without somebody coming in and literally doing it for them and showing them how to do it? That changes the category from supervision to assistance, maybe even total support. But it's rare that it's totally independent from making your bed. It's rare for cleaning your room. It's rare for doing laundry. It's rare for shopping for simple meals. It's rare for using the stove or microwave. And it's certainly rare for crossing the street on your own. I had a parent that told me once that she checks it because she lives in a good community, off like a dead-end street. And I asked her, would your son be able to cross the street under any other circumstances outside of his own block? And she told me absolutely not. So why are you checking independent there? You should not. You should not. It is assistance to total support. And then there are times where as a team, we will go through each of them and we will not agree on acuity. And at the end of the day, it's what the parent says or the self-advocate. And there have been times when I didn't agree, but I let it go because, again, it is the parent or the self-advocate. But as long as you're educated on it, you're able to make an informed decision. The other thing that a lot of parents and self-advocates document incorrectly is the clinical services. I tend to ask how often a child that has an IEP, in this section, you'll have how often do you see the psychologist, the psychiatrist, the speech and hearing pathologist, the physical therapist, the occupational therapist, the physician, the nurse, the social worker. For a child, I go against the IEP. Whatever is listed in their IEP and the frequency is what I document here. And I ask the care manager to document it accordingly. Generally, for adults, I'll ask how often they're seeing all of these providers, and I'll document it accordingly. For example, somebody that's receiving psychotropic medication generally will see the doctor, the psychiatrist every month, or the registered nurse every month. That's how I document it. For someone that has a prescription for physical therapy, speech therapy, so on and so forth, that's how I document this section. And this is a section that's generally, again, overlooked or inaccurately documented. All right. The best source of reference is the documentation that you already have. As a reminder, your psychosocial, psych eval, your neurological assessment, and your medical. These documents are tools that you should keep handy and be able to pull out every time you need them to cross-reference. And when things change, you have to be prepared to let your providers know that you have to do an updated DDP2 score. I'll give an example of that. I had a client that had experienced a couple of hospitalizations for various seizures and different things, and their acuity changed. And as a result of that, it had to be documented in the DDP2. I'll tell you, family, the state looks at these things. They look at historically what you've documented and then what you're documenting presently. And you have to be prepared to show documentation or give a verbal explanation as to why things have changed. And when changes occur, please ensure that you're putting it in your life plan. I speak about that in prior sessions as well. We'll touch on that in future videos. But make sure that you're telling your care manager to document that in the medical section of your life plan as changes are occurring, so that when the state sees a change and an increase in your PRA as a result of updating your DDP2 score, you can then say, I spoke about it in a life plan meeting and I have updated medical documentation to support the changes. Okay, I think that's about it. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, please put it in the comment and I will answer accordingly. As I've stated previously, these are my words. It's not based on my experiences. I do not represent the Office of People with Developmental Disabilities and the things that I am expressing in this video. It is merely based on being a self-direction broker and a seasoned professional in the state of New York, and things that I do that I help produce positive outcomes in. Take care and enjoy the rest of your week.